Here we are, episode 14 of Quantum Leap, and here I am with my review for you. Let's talk about this episode. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and welcome to my review for the latest episode of Quantum Leap, as I said, entitled S.O.S. Now, as we saw at the end of the last episode of Quantum Leap, in the teaser, or in the leap scene at the end, Ben ended up on board this battleship in what seemed to be like a sort of war situation. I called it then, and I said, you know, this isn't a war, it's inevitably going to be war games or the like. And thusly, it turned out to be. It is a drill, essentially, that they're a part of. Now, he leaps into Commander Rossi, who's the operations officer on board the USS Montana, third in command of this ship, captained by Bill Drake, with X.O, played by Brandon Routh. Yes, Superman Returns, Legends of Tomorrow, Brandon Routh, fantastic. Now, the USS Montana is on sort of operations in the South China Sea, and it's about to partake in some war games with South Korea and Australia. And obviously, being in the South China Sea, this is quite a dangerous place to be because of the Chinese. And we come to find out that what happens is that there's a distress call is received, and the distress call ends up being ignored, and American submarine downs, and all lives on board are lost. 138 souls. So Ben's there to ensure that this submarine gets rescued. It turns out that the X.O, played by Brandon Routh, is actually the father of Addison, and he ends up being driven out of the Navy and is embarrassed for essentially the rest of his life because of this situation and the fact that he could have done something and didn't. He ignored the distress call. Only it turns out it wasn't actually him. It was actually Captain Drake that had ignored the distress call against the X.O's wishes, but he took it on board. He was the one, the X.O was the one who fell on his sword, essentially, for this dismissal of this call and all lives being lost. Only things start changing, and they do head off to intercept this distress call, but on the route, stuff happens. They're being followed by a Chinese submarine that's keeping an eye on them, spying on them. Only Bill Drake, he sends a torpedo off towards his submarine just to scare them against the X.O's wishes. He didn't want it to happen. But then a bit later on, the submarine gets hit by what they believe to be, or what the captain believes to be, a torpedo from this submarine. And he wants to hunt that submarine down and destroy it. Only it's not a torpedo, it's a mine that's floating in the water. The Chinese, I was going to say the Russians then, the Chinese had put loads of mines along their shoreline to stop any submarines coming in, and these have broken free during this storm and are just floating out to sea, and it's one of these that hit the Montana. So we get this story of the captain who is having issues. He's got some personal issues and he's not making the right decisions. The X.O wants to make the right decisions, but is essentially fighting against the captain with them, and he doesn't want to do the captain wrong because he's got 20 years history with the captain and all this sort of stuff. We do get some stuff set in the modern day, but that stuff is very little in this episode. Very little to do with the main storyline or the storyline of Ian and what, you know, his potential leaping, but it is mentioned. But then the rest of it is essentially Ernie Hudson's magic, going off and seeing his Chinese fella that he knows who could give him some information about that time so they can unravel this mystery of what's got to be done. So, you know, this here was a good episode. This was a strong episode. It done right in its storytelling because it needed to get somewhere by a certain time with this submarine that was sinking and people need to be rescued. They've only got a limited time for this to happen in, with all this other stuff going on, with the mines, with the Chinese submarine, with the captain making these wrong decisions. So it puts a lot of pressure in that situation. You know, you've got to get this resolved before you get to this. There's no extending that. So it's quite a tight story, quite tight storytelling. It's nice to get Addison having a bit of character development in that we see her father, again played by Brandon Routh, and we learn a bit about his past and her family past, his parents, and stuff that she didn't know about him. So that's all really nice, really good. Brandon Routh's on top form in this episode. But then you see an actor like him and you think, wouldn't it have been great if you were the leaper? If you were the geezer cast in Ben's shoes and it was your show? Because Brandon Routh, let's be honest, he deserves more. He deserves to be doing more. He's a good actor, and you know, he's got great screen charisma. Yeah, but there we go. Now this episode does end on quite a big tease, and I'm not talking about the tease of where Ben leaps to next into the body of a lawyer. I'm talking about the fact that we see the return of Martinez, the other leaper. But he looks older. He looks like he's been leaping for some time, which gives you questions. And it answers, it leads you to questions, but answers other questions. It's interesting because it then sort of tells us that he's been leaping for a considerable amount of time. And this is a future version of himself. This is stuff that the older Quantum Leap show never really went into. And also the changes of if you alter something, will it change history for the people around them? And this is stuff that this Quantum Leap is slowly seeding in, and it's gonna go somewhere with it inevitably. It's done it with Ian, and it's doing it now with Addison in this episode, and like if it changes her, because we are going to see stuff playing out like this. And the fact now that you're getting, you know, leaps that are happening and there's no sort of time continuity to them, that they're not in a linear timeline, that you've met a younger version of Martinez, now you're meeting an older version, then you might meet a middle version and the older version stuff hasn't happened yet. You're going to start getting all this in this Quantum Leap, and that makes it a bit more intriguing and a bit more in-depth with the time travel stuff and what it could potentially lead to and what it's doing. It could mess it up like any sort of time travel story arc, where it just starts treading on its own toes and the rules aren't followed, but it's certainly moving away from what the first Quantum Leap actually was in doing this stuff. So that's all really nice to see. And yeah, do you know what? I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was very good. The special effects are crap. Yeah, the explosion on the side of the ship looks rubbish. The ship, when it's sat in water and it's getting the little lifeboats, getting the people back on, it looks rubbish. It looks like it hasn't got a budget to it whatsoever in that sense, beyond paying the actors and some sets. But yeah, but there we go. Does it need loads of special effects? Probably not. But I mean, it could probably have done better. But there we go. This is AJ. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below on this episode of Quantum Leap, on Quantum Leap in general. If it's working for you, if it's not working for you. There we go. And I shall see you on the next one. Take care all, and goodbye.